It's not out of the system yet. All right, Ash. All right, let's go, Kate. All right, so yesterday we were talking about the Battle of the Britain, and we were talking about really some kind of the defensive measures, obviously. Yeah, you guys set it up. I'll turn off the lights. Okay. We were talking about the RAF, obviously, and the impact of radar, the military side of it, and then kind of the, home defense, the barrage balloons, right, and stuff like that. So I have just a few more pictures and a couple things to talk about here. So when we look at, I showed you the Anderson shelter yesterday where you dig a hole in your backyard. If you could afford it, and steel is kind of hard to come by during the war, but if you could afford a Morrison shelter, it's kind of like you see thick steel legs on this. They put some chicken wire across here. You put a mattress in it, and during a bombing raid, you can stay in your house. The house comes down on top of you. This will support the weight of the rubble. Okay, and they're just gonna have to dig you out, but you'll probably survive. Okay, so you can in the comfort of your house. This is what 1940 radar looked like, radar stations. Okay, and they would put barrage balloons up around those to prevent Stuka dive bombers from getting in. Could
you actually hide their radar stations?
They were difficult to hide. Yes. And then, guys, the tube is what they call the subway in London. The tube was a place, obviously, you could get underground. They did have air raid shelters for people, but there were not enough. And so people were really not encouraged to do this, to go underground into the tubes, because a lot of them are built just under the road, about 5 feet under the road. So if a 500-pound bomb hit above this, what would happen? It would collapse. And guess what? That happened. Okay. Another place not to hide during a bombing raid is under a bridge. Bridges tend to be targets. Okay. So just in case we're ever in that situation. All right. Now the blackouts. I talked about the blackouts yesterday, and so like this is around London. Okay, and so everything's dark, but when you hear the planes and they're coming, you would turn on the spotlights to try and spot them, the bombers in the air. And we saw that a little bit in the video, the Narnia video. And so you can see some people here with spotlights. And then this is a picture of the British AK gun that they would use as an anti-aircraft fire to try and shoot down the bombers. Okay, and then I have some pictures of the children here. That were shipped off to the countryside, cute little British children there. But you'll notice these boxes they're carrying. Okay, those are gas masks. Okay, and it's when you look at World War I and World War II. World War II there wasn't a lot of use of poisonous gases like in one, but there was always that fear. Okay, and it's kind of inhumane to and hard to watch or look at pictures or video of children, practicing putting on gas masks. And these are the ones that, they have the long nose on them. And it's just, it's not a pretty thing to say about humanity that we were having to train for this sort of thing. You know what I mean? But they were all given an ID tag, like I said, and shipped off to the countryside. And that's just part of that British history. I want to go over a couple more things that in my research that I thought were interesting. I'll just share with you. Okay, these rockets here are actually called parachute and cable systems, not political action committees. And what you would do is you would line up these rockets near like an airfield. Okay, so you'd have these rockets. And in case of an air raid of the airfield, you could shoot these rockets up. Okay, they're not going to hit the plane, but what they are going to have, like the barrage balloon, is a steel cable. So basically, you're building a wall. A little parachute will pop out, and you'll have suspended cables, and this would, hopefully catch some German bombers. dive bombers. Okay. In all the research I did on this, I found that one time where these parachute and cable systems actually work. Okay. So if a wing did hit one of these, a parachute would pop out, okay, and create your drag. Okay, just like the barrage balloons. Okay. And then you can see the Germans, they tried to combat this with putting basically like wire cutters on the front of their aircraft to cut through the cables. This didn't turn out too well for this one. As you can see, this one's crashed. All right. And then they went a little bit medieval, okay, and some pretty ingenious ideas. So I know you guys are from Kansas, but if you're on the water, okay, and you see this sticking out of the water, it's red or green. What is it? It's a buoy, okay? For you that live in Kansas, all right? Some people don't know that, all right? Now, if you're ever in that situation where you see a red and a green, stay between the red and the green. If you get outside the red or the green buoy, you're going to go into shallow water and your boat is going to run aground. Been there, done that. Okay? So, underneath this, so one of the things in Britain, and my beautiful maps here, is the Thames River that runs up into London. Okay? And at places, the Thames is very wide. Okay? And so it was thought if the Germans came, they would bring vessels up the Thames River. Okay? But what looks like a buoy underneath the water is this platform with pontoons that you could put, billow out the water, and on top of this, okay, so you could raise the level here so it's sitting out of the water like this, and you would have machine guns and artillery to shoot at German vessels coming up the river. These are still sitting out there today. Okay. In fact, one guy got up on top of it and claimed it as a country. Okay. Now, this next one, the picture on the left, in one of the videos I showed you yesterday, I think you were able to see the White Cliffs of England. Okay, they have these really tall white cliffs in different parts of the coastline here. So if the Germans were to invade by sea, they wouldn't land where those cliffs are because they're too easy of a target trying to climb cliffs, as we'll find out on D-Day. Okay, so where they thought they might land, you guys know what PVC pipe is, like that white plastic pipe. They took PVC pipe, drilled holes in it, put it out into the surf, into the water, in places where they thought the Germans might land. And in the case of a landing, they would pump oil into that PVC pipe, leaking oil, coating the surface of the water. Okay? And then all you would need to do is ignite it. And if German vessels were coming in, they would be incinerated. Good thing the Germans didn't think of this on D-Day. Okay, what was already a horrific situation would have been much worse. Okay, but that's pretty ingenious. Not something that we would ever need in Kansas, but if you ever move to the coast and threaten invasion by the sea, this is probably a good idea. Okay, so you can pass that on to the authorities if you feel like it. Okay. Yeah, so guys, the point of this is when you look at history and you look at a moment in history where basically every citizen of Great Britain had some role to play in this survival, okay? And I know I spent quite a bit of time on it, but it's something that, like I said before, I've written a lot about, read a lot about, and found pretty interesting, okay? So the British will survive. And so Hitler, obviously, he's going to turn his attention to Russia, right? And we may get to that today. But his rear is going to be open. Okay? To his rear, he's going to end up having to fight a war on two fronts, which he had hoped to avoid. But those pesky British, those stubborn British, held out. Okay? And we can all be thankful for that today. Okay? All right. right, so let's come back across the pond. We're going to do some politics. Time for another election. Okay. Roosevelt first elected in 32, re-elected in 36. Now it's 1940. The Republicans again have very little chance of winning. All right, and they're going to put up a guy named Wendell Willkie. Last time it was Alf Landon. Remember Alf Landon from Kansas, right? Yeah. And so Willkie, again, like most Republicans of the day, were opposed to much of the New Deal. Not all of the New Deal, but much of it. Okay. But what was good for the country in this election is that both parties agreed foreign policy-wise. Both were isolationists, but both agreed that we needed to prepare just in case. Okay. And so like we saw in World War I, we're going to see conscription, okay, or the draft, okay, which was passed in September of 1940, right before the election, okay, and Willkie did not, like go after FDR on this and say, oh, he's starting a war, he's drafting people in, and so they started drafting people between the ages of 18 and 35 into the military, and they put a limit of that of 900,000, okay. Now, what they realized quite early on in this process is it's not a good idea to draft 35-year-olds. Why? They're old.
They have a job.
They're important to the community. A lot of them have families. They have important jobs, some of them, okay? And they're out of shape, okay? So, this is Willkie campaign. It's kind of a cool campaign picture, kind of dangerous standing up in a convertible like that, okay? And then some of our first conscripts or draftees, okay? So what's conscription? The draft, okay? I guess I could, you guys want to see an electoral college map from 1940?
What was the age group again?
18 to 35. I don't want that. All right, fine. The link's no good. 1940 electoral. Ah. And sit there. Oh, come on. Sit there. Can somebody make it bigger for me?
I don't.
Press
Okay,
the
go, okay,
top right hand corner.
here, go.
Everybody can see this. All right, so Kansas went for the Republican. So you see the Great Plains here, kind of, and then Indiana, Michigan, Maine, and Vermont. Okay, went for Willkie, and do we have a total here somewhere? Popular vote. I can't read that.
They don't click it.
What?
They don't click the picture.
It's gonna go to the state.
Here, okay, so go to the other tab. Tab you were just at,
View image.
yeah,
Either right click it.
right click and then click view image in another tab. Up, right there.
Or down.
Oh,
You can
Oh, that's awkward.
Zoom. Where's the Zoom button?
And then hit control.
Bye-bye.
Control.
We're moving on. It was a landslide. Okay, everybody good on that one? Okay, all right. Now this is pretty interesting here. Go ahead and open this on my computer. Okay, so remember, Britain's in trouble, right? And so the United States is trying to do the thing. And one thing I want to mention here, guys, Churchill was telegraphing Roosevelt on a daily basis. He was bugging the crap out of Roosevelt. We need help. We need help. You guys need to get in the war. United States, come on now, let's go. We got our backs against the wall, okay? But Roosevelt and the American people are not ready for that. So FDR is going to try legal devices to help the Allies receive supplies. Okay, now at this point, who are the Allies? Britain and China. Okay? Oh, yeah. Against the Japanese? Yes. Okay? And soon, Russia, the Soviet Union will be coming out. Okay? Soon, not yet. Okay? Maybe the next 2 slides. Now, to get around this, he sold stuff to private American companies, had those companies sell it to the British, so it wasn't the U.S. government doing it, okay? And these merchant ships, remember the cash and carry, they bring their ships over, fill them up with supplies, take them back over, okay? Well, these ships are being sunk by German submarines in the Atlantic in large numbers. So a lot of the supplies were winding up at the bottom of the Atlantic. Just to give you a good number, during World War II, 4,600 ships sunk in the Atlantic. That's a lot, okay? So Churchill is asking for support to get destroyers to help escort ships across the Atlantic, okay, to avoid these German U-boats. Okay, now these U-boats, this is just some picture of 1935 to 45 Kriegsmarine U-boats, okay, or Unterboten, okay, is an underwater boat, right, Shay? Unterboten, das Boot, right? The boat, Unterboten, okay.
Very creative name, isn't it?
Yes. Now, Churchill asks the U.S., hey, will you use some of your Navy, the U.S. Navy, to escort our ships across the Atlantic to protect them from these subs? Dude, if we do that, U.S. destroyers are going to come under attack. We're going to be drawn into the war. So instead, they come up with an idea, okay, that we're going to give them 50 World War I destroyers that we're not using anymore. We're building new ones, okay, that are sitting on mothballs in Annapolis. And they're going to allow us to use 8 naval and air bases that the British have in the British Empire for 99-year leases. We'll get to use these bases, okay? And so, seems like a fair deal, right? And Churchill, remember who sunk the French fleet, or part of the French fleet, said, look, if we lose, we will scuttle these ships. We will not let them fall into the hands of the Germans, because he knows what that's about. Okay, so in doing a little bit of research on this, guys, I said, well, this is interesting. Let me look into this a little more. So I found this website, and it just shows you what happened with some of these ships during the war. Okay, these are the 8 naval and air stations that the British allow us to use: Antigua, Barbuda, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Bermuda, Newfoundland, and Trinidad. Okay. And this is what the World War I destroyers looked like. Okay, good looking ships. Better than that USS Alabama that I showed you that, what's his name, Billy Mitchell blew up. Okay, these are pretty good ships. Okay, so they're going to get to use these. Now the British are going to rename them. Okay, and so each one has its fate. And that's the cool thing about this website is that it tells you what happened with these ships. Okay. And so, like, the Ward was renamed the Castleton. It survived the war and was broken up for scrap in 1947 after the war. Okay, some of these have very interesting histories. This one, the Buchanan, okay, was renamed the Campbelltown, chosen for the raid of Saint Nazaire, France, packed with explosives, was rammed into the gate of the Normandy dry dock at Saint Nazaire. When the charges went off, the dry dock gate was blown off, and the dock was rendered unusable by the Germans. So it's packed with explosives. It's like one of those things, you see in the movies, like somebody puts something on the gas of the car and then just jump out, let it go, okay? Like a suicide mission, all right? But if I scroll down a little bit further here, guys, some of these were actually given to the Russians later on, okay? And some of them, like this one here, the Hopewell, renamed the Bath, was sunk by U-boat 204, okay, in 1941. This one, these two, the Broadwater was sunk by U-boat 101. This one was sunk by U-boat 574. Okay, there's others that hit mines and stuff like that. Okay, but a lot of them survived the war. Okay, so that's kind of a pretty neat website. Yeah, probably the Royal Navy commanders. You know, I think with the United States, when we name our vessels, I think it's actually Congress that names them. Okay, I'm not sure how the British do it. So, I mean, we have Navy ships named after Wichita. Adam over named after Wichita. I'm not sure why, but usually they're named after people. A lot of times people. Okay. All right. Yeah. So now, obviously, some people were opposed to this. They felt like this could drag us into the war, like we're doing too much, we're not being neutral enough, and that sort of thing. But guys, the British are in trouble. Okay. Now I don't know how many guys have watched submarine movies. Okay. There's a couple good World War II submarine movies. One's called Das Boot. Okay. One's called U-571. Any of you guys seen that? Okay, it's pretty good. Ladies, it's got Matthew McConaughey in it. U-571. All right. Now, the greatest submarine movie of all time is The Hunt for Red October. Yeah. Great movie. Now, that's Cold War. That's during, the nuclear age. Okay. All right. Good here? Good? All right. All right, now, this is what's in every textbook that everybody talks about. This is kind of a big deal, but really it's just, for me, it's just another part of the step towards war, trying to help the British, okay? So the British are running out of money, they're running out of ships. And so famously, we signed the Lend-Lease Act, all right? So you guys remember all the European debt that was owed to us during World War I, that $9 billion that we talked about. Certainly, guys, when we are loaning to the British again, we do hope to get paid back. Okay, in reality, we won't. Okay, but there is an expectation that this stuff just isn't for free. Okay, yeah.
How many deals have we given people that they haven't paid back?
This is the United States of America. Look, man, when you're the wealthiest nation in the world, people are like, hey, man, sorry, can't help you. You know, and we're like, okay.
It's only another
I'm gonna say wrong.
Yeah. Hey, one day maybe we'll be asking China for help. Okay. All right.
Why are we the wealthiest?
Sorry to say that. We need to clean our act up, people.
Why are we the wealthiest?
Because we have a lot of socialism here, and that's what really drove our economy up. I'm kidding. What?
I was
What?
It's actually, I've heard it's because we've moved less to manufacturing and more we're a bunch of banks and lawyers at this point.
Oh, I mean, in the modern age, yeah. I mean, most of the things we do are service industry, okay, which includes banking. But what the thing that's really been a saving grace for us is our ingenuity, the technology we create, and then we have other people build it for us. I mean, that's what we do, and that's really good for the American consumer, okay, because the American consumer can buy cheap products made overseas, technology created by us. Okay, so the stock market, guys, is where it's at. You know what I mean? So these American companies that you can invest in, this is how so many people become wealthy is off the stock market. Listen, guys, if you get a good job and you start investing when you're young, you will be rich too. But if you don't put your money to work for you, you're going to rely on somebody else who you go to your job for, okay, and you're going to have to work more years than if you don't put your money to work for you. And it doesn't have to be the stock market. You can get involved in real estate. You can get involved in, like buying duplexes or apartments and renting them out. You can invest that way your money. Okay, there's lots of different ways to invest your money. But if you don't do that, you're generally going to be dependent on somebody else for your subsistence. Now, that could be your job, or it could be the government. Are you following me? Okay, but that's where real wealth is created. When people take what they earn and they put that to work for themselves. That could be starting your own business. Taking that money, working for somebody else, saving it, hoarding it, and then investing it in yourself. Starting your own business. That creates wealth. Because when you start your own business, you help create wealth for other people that work for you. And then they can go do the same thing if they have that entrepreneurial spirit. That's how we became the richest country in the world. Can I move on now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Lend-Lease. Later payment, right? Okay. Also, later on, I don't have it up here. Later on, China's going to come under Lend-Lease, and so will Russia, the Soviet Union. Okay. We're going to help both of these, all three of these countries. Okay. Before long, though, here we go. U.S. ships are going to be delivering supplies. No longer cash and carry. Guess what? U.S. ships are going to come under attack by German submarines. Americans are going to start dying. Civilians, merchant ships. Okay? Now, this picture here taken with Churchill and Roosevelt. This takes place in mid-1941. It's a secret meeting. Nobody knows about it. The press doesn't know about it. The people don't know about it. Churchill braves the Atlantic by boat, and they meet in Nova Scotia, up in Canada. Okay? So Churchill's going to sail, Newfoundland, up here. Okay, and they're going to meet up here. They're sitting on a ship. Okay, sitting for obvious reasons. Yes, because the president, Okay, now it is here in mid-1941. Remember, Pearl Harbor's December of 41, right? Mid-1941. It's discussed when the United States gets in the war. How will we work with the British, and what will be the strategy? That's what this Atlantic Charter is all about. And it is decided there that once the United States got in this war, that we would deal with Europe first and deal with the Pacific secondly. So the main focus would be Europe. Okay? And that's kind of how it plays out. Okay? We will be active in the Pacific once we get in, but not nearly as active as we are in Europe. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's decided here. Churchill's feeling a little bit better, okay? Because after the Battle of Britain, the British are kind of stuck. There's not a lot they can do. They do start to bomb Germany with the RAF. They start to hit back, okay? So, but as far as a ground invasion anywhere, the British are active in North Africa, which I will talk about mostly in the next chapter, okay? The British just start sitting on their hands. But they need a lot of help. Okay. Now, this is a good picture of a convoy. Okay, and these became very common in the Atlantic. So what you would do, you see all these ships, can you see them? You would put your most precious cargo, the most important cargo, in the middle of the convoy. And you would have destroyers and cruisers kind of patrolling on the outside of the convoy looking for German U-boats. Okay, and this tended to help. So the whole convoy would come across the Atlantic together, and it helped better than just having single ships going across on their own. Okay, so they were escorted, and that is going to become the main mode of supply routes across the Atlantic. Now, this map real quick. And I know it's probably hard to see back there, but if you look on your canvas, you can see this. All of these dots represent Allied warship losses and Allied merchant ship losses. The green dots are German U-boat losses. Okay? So as we get closer to war, FDR extends the zones necessary to the defense of the U.S. further out into the Atlantic. So if you look at this line here, okay, basically what Roosevelt says is that if German ships are in here, we are going to defend the United States. Okay? And then we send troops to Greenland and Iceland. This is smart. Okay? Sending troops there to occupy important ports, and obviously the ports in Greenland are all in the south. Okay? And then Iceland's, it's round, it's an island. So that's important because if the Germans want to move on the United States, they're going to need refueling stations in the Atlantic. Okay? And so we're going to go ahead and occupy those before the Germans do. Good strategy. Okay? Then this, which is almost, you could call an act of war by the United States. Congress authorizes the seizure of 92 ships in American harbors controlled by Italy and Germany. We're going to freeze their assets. In June 14, 1941, all German and Italian assets are frozen in this country. Doesn't mean we steal the money, we just don't allow them access to it. That money will be frozen here so that they can't use it against us. After the war, after the treaties and so forth, that money will be unfrozen. Okay. We did that after 9/11, guys. There were a lot of Islamic businesses, charities, and so forth that were sending money from the United States to the Middle East. And some of those businesses and charities were supporting Al-Qaeda. Okay, so almost immediately after 9/11, we froze like a bunch of bank accounts. Said we're not letting that money leave the country to be used against us. Does that make sense? Okay. And man, for the longest time after 9/11, for about 2 years, we were able to help track down terrorists by using banking information. American banks were sharing information with the U.S. government until the New York Times wrote a story about it. And then the terrorist organizations knew how we were tracking them. Nice. Nice. Okay. Now, when you're at war, we know this, right? Government becomes a lot more powerful. All right. So here we go. Now it is June of 1941. And how much time left? 10 minutes? It is June of 1941. And this is going to change the course of history right here. Hitler's going to do what he said he was always going to do. He's going to invade the Soviet Union. This is known as Operation Barbarossa. Okay. Now, it's important to recognize the date here. It's June. Okay. Now, for us, that's early summer, right? Okay. No. Now, what's the biggest country with the biggest landmass in the world? The Soviet Union, yeah, Russia. Now, Hitler's going to be launching this from Western Poland, yes, okay, and he's going to go into the motherland. Now, there was another guy that tried this, about 100 years earlier. Yeah, Napoleon tried this. How'd that work out? Say what? Now, you can't blame Hitler for believing that Blitzkrieg could conquer all, and conquer all quickly, yes? I mean, look what he did in Europe. Had a little trouble with the British there, though. Hitler was confident. The Russians will fight. I'm going to take you over here to the map.
Did he start Russia by invasion, or did he?
Both. Yeah, I mean, he bombed. Yeah. And then massive land invasion. Okay, so I want to show you something real quick. What's the capital of the Soviet Union?
Moscow.
Moscow. Okay, now, if you want to defeat a country, it helps to defeat their, their government, to defeat the seat of government, which is Moscow. Okay, and so I'm going to point to Moscow right here. Okay, here's Moscow. Now follow my finger across here. All right, so this is how far north Moscow is on the map. Okay, so the weather here is different than the weather is here. Yes, as you move through the summer into the fall months. Okay, now there's one city in the United States that's not in the mountains, that is notorious for getting massive amounts of snow every year. Minnesota gets a lot. Buffalo, New York. Right here, okay? Buffalo, New York sits on the edge of Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, and then you've got Huron up here. And they get what's called lake effect snow. There's a lot of moisture that comes off the lake, goes up into the air, and it dumps feet of snow in Buffalo. Okay. You guys know how it's almost 90%, 95% of the time in Kansas. It's either blowing out of the south or the north. You know what I mean? It's rare you get the wind out of the east or the west, okay? We live in kind of the jet stream. You know, when you watch, this comes down, it always does this crap, right? Okay? And then it's always doing this, right? The storms are always doing this, okay? Now, the Soviet Union has the Baltic Sea effect, okay? And the jet stream here does this. Okay, so they get really bad winters in Russia, especially Western Russia. Okay, I mean, hell, you get up here in Siberia, it's just so far north, it's the frozen tundra, you know what I mean? So, as Germany's leaving from Poland, okay, they are going to head east, okay? They will face resistance, but they are having a lot of victories, okay? And they're actually moving pretty fast. So what Russia chooses to do is use the scorched earth practice. So as the Soviets retreat, they will destroy anything that the German army would be able to use for shelter, for food. They will poison drinking water sources and so forth. So as the fall months start to set in, you start to get into September. It starts to get chilly then. Okay, October, it starts to get really cold. We get some cold October days in Kansas. Okay, remember how much further north we are. Okay, so this is devastating on the population of Western Russia. Because the scorched earth is going to affect all of those civilians as well. You understand? But does Stalin care? Stalin doesn't care. Okay? I mean, this is like really tragic stuff, guys. I mean, we are talking about millions of people dying, starving to death, freezing to death. Literally, Russian civilians are digging holes in the ground just to have some shelter. It's awful, okay? And if you were to come here from another planet, and you said, I want to learn about World War II. Well, we wouldn't, I mean, we might mention D-Day a little bit and some of the American battles, but guys, if you want to study World War II, this is where World War II takes place. More people will fight, more people will die on the Eastern Front by far than in any other part of the war. Okay? This is a U.S. history class, so I'm covering this a little bit, but trying to get, some background on it. And guys, if you want to read interesting history, read Russian history. Holy cow. These people have been through incredible things. Okay? So anyhow, as the winter sets in, the Germans are actually going to get within 15 miles of Moscow. And the dead of winter is upon them. Now the Germans are having to resupply all the way from Poland because of the scorched earth. They can't use the natural resources that are in Russia. This makes it very difficult. The German soldiers were wearing summer uniforms when they left. Now they're freezing to death. It was so cold in Russia. You're supposed to say, how cold was it? How cold was it? Let's try this again. It was so cold in Russia
How cold was it?
that the German tank treads froze to the ground. They couldn't move their tanks. It was so cold in Russia
How cold was it?
that, this is hard to believe, German tank oil froze. It was so cold in Russia,
How cold was it?
if you got shot and you started to bleed out, the blood would freeze as it was leaving the body. That's how cold it
If you survive that, like,
was. No, it's not going to cure you, man.
like,
It's not like, what you call it. Yeah. Or, when they freeze people's heads, or whatever. Yeah. Cryotherapy or whatever. All right. I'll finish up, well, I won't finish this up, but I'll continue with this, tomorrow, okay? Or Monday. Have a great weekend.
I don't know.